This week has been challenging. It's been a challenging week, and in putting together this video, I was thinking about talking about what it is to be intimidated, to be overwhelmed, to feel such intense doubt about what you're doing that it seems so insurmountable. That phase in the hero's journey where you resist the call, where it just seems like too much. That's really where I was at this week, and in some ways I am going to talk about that. But I am actually really hopeful because I feel like I have found a framework to consider this epic quest that I'm on. My name's Asa Merritt. I wrote 6 sermons, the Audible original series. That's a series, it's scripted, and now I am documenting my journey into fiction. I'm becoming a fiction writer. I have aspirations to become a professional short story writer. That's what I'm documenting on this channel. And this week, it's been really scary. I've realized how far I have to go artistically, how far I have to go professionally, the systems I have to put into place, both in terms of output, of the writing, of the sending, of the delivering, but all the professional apparatus of kind of like, oh my God, where to submit X, Y, and Z. But there's a giant win here that I think I can use as a container to talk about all those things. And in fact, I think it's one I can refer to again and again and again on this channel to keep you posted and share this journey in a way that's useful. So I'm a big fan of big metaphors, and an extended metaphor that I've identified that I can use for describing this journey is summiting Mount Everest. Everest being the ultimate goal, to create a career where I'm regularly writing, selling short stories, publishing collections, belonging in anthologies, that kind of thing. That's the summit. How are we getting there? We're getting there on the ascents. So the ascents are going to be the stories, each of the stories I'm writing, the various drafts, getting them to completion, sending them out, eventually selling them. But then there's so much else that goes into this process to getting to that summit. And that's where the base camp comes in to continue this metaphor. And again, this gives me like a container to think about all these things I have to do to get to the summit. And in the base camp, we have things like continuing to educate myself about craft, formal study of short stories, what that entails from the masters. I'm going to talk about a class that I took this past week. It involves, of course, reading, voraciously consuming short stories. We're going to talk about several GOAT short story writers in this video that I've been reading this week. Additionally, there's the professional stuff. All this is the milieu of base camp, and I spent a lot of time in base camp this week, and so this gives me a nice little kind of metaphor in which to share everything. I'm so excited. But first things first, let's talk about the writing itself, the ascents. I'm now sitting at 4 short stories that I've drafted. I created a new system for drafting in Google Docs. Traditionally, I've written in Scrivener, but because short stories are so short, I can just copy each successive draft. I write my first draft by hand. I identify that as V0, version 0, and then each subsequent draft, V1, V2, V3. Where we're at, we've got 2 flash fiction pieces, 2 short stories hovering around kind of a 3,000 word mark. These are in progress. Identifying that system was a win this week. And like I said, the general feeling is like overwhelm, but I identified that as like, okay, cool. Now you have a system. That's one fewer thing that you have to do moving forward. So that's where it stands with the stories. I'm a horror writer. Each of these stories sort of exists within the horror space, but one of them in particular really just feels like traditional literary fiction. So that's exciting as well. Maybe that's the K2 side of the mountain. We'll see. What's going on in base camp? On the learning front, I burned through Joyce Carol Oates' masterclass. I had started that and finished that this week. And one little takeaway that I got there that, the big takeaway from when I started the class was this idea of starting and finishing a short story draft in one sitting, the value of that kind of like get to the end, no matter by hook or by crook, that I experimented with and found really successful. Another thing that I took away from this week was this idea that a really good short story captures kind of a pivotal moment in someone's life, a real before after kind of moment where it's something small, but it changes the way that the character sees the world forever, or sort of leaves a mark on them that informs their life from there on out. They're never the same. She speaks about Indian Camp, the iconic story by Ernest Hemingway, which I then went and read as a great example of this. And it's just that. It's about this little boy who goes with his father to a Native American camp where a woman is giving birth. He's completely unprepared to witness this life or death act. And not only that, in the course of this birth, someone in the tent kills themselves. And this kid leaves changed. It's like this kind of full coming to age reckoning with mortality on both sides of that coin, life and death, in a single evening. And it's a really short story, 1,500 words. And it just kind of really articulated that point. So that was a big takeaway on kind of the craft front. Additionally, she shared, this line of Hemingway's that I thought was really cool, where he would draft. When he was drafting, he would write and write and write until he got to what he identified as a true sentence, the first true sentence, and then made that the beginning of the story. And in the 4 stories that I've written so far that I've drafted, I've started to revisit them, started to rewrite them slightly, and it's happened a couple times where I can just get to a part of the story and things just feel a little looser. They feel a little more here, a little less here, and it has like the air and the resonance of I'm actually putting something down on the page worth saying. And so those were the kind of learning elements that happened this week. On the reading front, we had a really great reading week. In addition to that Hemingway classic, which I had never read, really working on the classics. I'm digging into this collection, the Volokonskaya Piver translation of the selected stories of Anton Chekhov. Of course, some say he's the true goat of goats in terms of short stories, and it's been a real treat to get into his work. I know his plays relatively well. I got my start as a writer in playwriting and dramatic writing, like I mentioned. But the short stories remain kind of out of reach, and I do have to say that I get it. These stories are wonderful, and I'm trying to pinpoint, what makes them so special, what makes them so memorable when you read them. And I really think that what it is that the characters in these stories are so petty and so flawed, and their preoccupations are, you could say, base or amoral, but it's just so relatable, and he treats them with such empathy. And I think the experience of reading them is it not only puts a mirror up to us and be like, oh my God, the stuff that keeps you up at night is so silly. But I'm going to hold kindness for that. And I really think these stories create kind of a sense. It's a reminder that just witness can be a real sign of love. To see someone and just see them and create space for their existence and their concerns is such kind of like an act of devotion. I think that's true in life. And then to see it in fiction is kind of like there's the wisdom piece there. And it's like, oh, I can see this on the page and I can apply this to my life. And it truly, potentially an example of literature as a way to kind of change people and make them more kind. I don't know. I'd like to think, maybe by the time I finish this collection, I'll be a kinder soul. One can hope. Other readings, again, kind of sticking with canonical stuff right now on the horror front. I'm continuing to work my way through Songs of a Dead Dreamer and Grimscribe, this dual collection from Thomas Lugatti. This is dark AF. I highly recommend it. One thing I think a lot about in terms of becoming a horror writer is, do you actually want to scare people? If so, then this is one of your writers. Similarly, Lovecraft, who I'm again just dipping my toes into for the first time, such clearly a foundational horror writer, is in this same business. And, it's interesting as I continue to find my way into the horror space, is kind of meeting out what it is that these horror narratives are doing, what is a ghost story, what is a zombie story, what is a cosmic horror story, and just trying to be really sensitive to how I feel as I read these things. So these have been really good from developing a genre taste kind of aesthetic that I'm working on. What else? Oh, this is really exciting. So, continuing the metaphor, no one summits Everest alone. You have allies, you have a team. This is also straight out of Hero's Journey stuff. I keep referring to Hero's Journey because in addition to, most of the master classes I've already taken, but that Joyce Carol Oates one was a new one. The other kind of formal education piece that I'm in right now is I'm taking the life writing course from Tananarive and Stephen Barnes, the iconic writers who are both prolific short story writers, Afrofuturist, horror, speculative writing. That's all my jam. And their writing course has been really inspiring. It's really kind of like, get hype, you can do this type course. Write every day, read all the time, send your stories out. It's been really inspiring. I recommend that. Anyway, I bring that up because they talk a lot about applying the hero's journey to your journey as a writer, putting that to work. And of course, where I'm going with all this is this finding allies stage of the writer's journey. I have found an ally. I found a couple, but one in particular here on YouTube. Her name is Dominique. I will put her in the comments. We are starting what we're tentatively calling the Short Story Society. We're going to workshop our own short stories here on YouTube live for you. Check it out. I'll put a post or whatever, but it's going to be like Friday, midday EST. I want to say 1 EST Fridays. And we're going to choose a short story every week to dissect from a kind of a literary point of view as well, but like writer forward. How does this story work? And then workshop our own work. You are invited. Bloodchild by Octavia Butler is the first story we are going to dissect. The first meeting will be July 4th. Stay tuned for that. So in terms of the climbing team, it's coalescing. It's so exciting to find writers who are sort of in the same kind of gesture right now, both creatively and professionally. And I'm so excited to collab with Dominique. I hope y'all can join us. What else? We talked about the reading, last but not least, getting some of these professional tools in place. One thing that I've also found overwhelming is where to submit, how to find out where to submit, how to track your submissions. There are a number of different sites out there designed for this. Duotrope, Chill Subs. The one that I think I'm going to kind of commit to is Submission Grinder. This is the one recommended by Douglas Smith, whose Hustle short story class I took, and I've subsequently bought that book. Again, in terms of finding your allies, I think him in that book and everything in that book is going to prove a useful professional guide. That's a really brass tacks. It's like write every day, finish what you write, send out what you write, keep what you write in the market until it sells. This real kind of like journeyman professional mentality that I'm really trying to adopt and find faith in. I read these stories that I've written and, I'm sitting here reading Chekhov and it's just the distance, between what I'm writing and Lady and the Lapdog or Indian Camp, iconic stories. And it's just, these various mentors from afar, Tananarive, they're just like, you know what? It's a numbers game. You got to finish stuff. You got to face the rejection. And so I'm slowly kind of like in this middle ground where it's like, I'm so afraid. I'm so disappointed in the stories. And, that's coming off some real growth already. If you saw my video last week, in a lot of ways, I feel really inspired right now. I feel like I'm entering into this fiction space in a way that's fresh. But still, of course, there's such tremendous doubt. And I sit down to these rewrites and I'm just like, God, is this even worth revising? But I'm going to commit to finishing them, and just send them out in the world and have the attitude that finishing and sending them and polishing pieces is going to be the path towards eventually developing a truly original voice, hitting the types of great stories that I think I'm capable of writing, all that good stuff. It brings to mind Ira Glass, the famous NPR host, my background is in one of my former careers is in journalism, and I worked in audio journalism a lot. And, he has this iconic sort of take where he says that, when you're starting something out, your taste can be really high, but your ability can be really low. And you have that taste, but it just takes so long to get to where you can be. And that's where I feel right now. But again, I'm trying to kind of construct of that doubt and that knowledge and hold it in such a way that it's not overwhelmingly debilitating or kind of like sapping of confidence, and just kind of this like fake it till you make it. And I think this like coalition, whether it's Dominique and our writing group and these classes and just pushing through, I'm hoping that over time we're going to continue the ascents and eventually one day reach the summit. Because I would be remiss not to leave you with a writing tip today, I want to talk about something I noticed in one of these Chekhov short stories. I'm going to call it misdirection. Misdirection in a short story, and how that can be a really effective way to deliver, sort of meaning. So I want to talk about this story. It's called Easter Night, and it's in this collection. I'm sure you can find it online. And the gist of the story is you have this gentleman, this man who's identified as a gentleman, a non-peasant. We're dealing with 19th century Russian society where there's like a pretty clear class system. And he's going to this town where an Easter celebration is happening. And he is crossing a river to get there. He's waiting for the ferry. And on the ferry ride, he has this long conversation with the ferryman who tells him how anguished he is about someone who just died in the town. And all the while, the story asserts itself about, it's like, here's a guy who wants to get to the festival. The ferry's late. The ferry guy is like talking his ear off, which is delaying it even farther. So the story sets itself up as like our protagonist is the gentleman. His goal is to get to the festival, but there are delays. Those are the obstacles. The story frames itself as like, that's the basic narrative. But as it unfolds, he goes to the festival, and once he's at the festival, he just keeps thinking about this conversation that he had with the ferryman. He reflects on it. He thinks that the ferryman should be there. Because he can't be there, he's stuck on his ferry, he's working, he can't express his grief over this person who's died. And then the nice little frame, the end of the story, is he returns the following morning. It's an all-night celebration, and there's the ferryman again. And the whole time, then it just sort of delivers, it sneaks up on us that what this story is really about is the ferryman and how he missed out on this Easter night, and how the gentleman was thinking about him that whole time and was able to kind of share